my contemporaries of 1976 are people like Phumzile Mlambo. We were students together under Professor Njabulo Ndebele. Then there were others. Some were exiles like Mzimkhulu Kwenche, with whom we ultimately established CASAS, our student organization, solidarity organization, which had been inspired by Chris Hani from 1978 April. And so by the time Tito came, 1981-82, you can say both Tito were the second wave. So post-76, 76 group, then Bobo Tito, second wave of the early 80s. And so he then registered in 81, 82, and when I came back from postgraduate studies, he was already doing second or third year, and then we encountered each other 1984, 1985 in the course that I taught on the political economy of Southern Africa.
Clearly we had a very fascinating group, very vibrant at the time, and clearly we can see the fruits. How important was that course, perhaps to the likes of Tito at the time?
That was quite an important course because it was actually a 2-semester course, the main course on Southern African politics. And for South Africans who were either exiles or just students who were not exiles, it was a very important foundational course because it enabled them to firstly come to terms with the political economy of South Africa, how South Africa moved from the mining industry in the 1880s to emergence of industry manufacturing just before the Second World War, and then properly speaking, the boom of the South African economy under apartheid after 1948, and which then also coincides with the intensification of the struggle from the 1950s. So we tried in the course to cover the history of the South African politics and economics, and then South Africa's liberation politics, and especially focusing on the ANC, the impact of the ANC Youth League that was established in 1941, and the generation of Mandela, Sisulu, and Tambo. So, by the time we then come to the 1976 uprising, we have already covered the struggle up to the Rivonia trial of 1964, the imprisonment of the leading political leaders, especially of the ANC, the state of emergency of 1960 after Sharpeville, and then the emergence of black consciousness under Steve Biko in the late 60s, early 70s. And I always found that if that course is well done, it really connected South African students, and Basotho students, of course, to the history of the economics and politics of South Africa. We then connected South Africa with Southern Africa, how Zimbabwe was an extension of South Africa through Cecil Rhodes. Remember, it was Rhodesia. And then Zambia was Northern Rhodesia, while Zimbabwe was Southern Rhodesia. Then Portuguese colonialism in Mozambique and Angola. And then ultimately, the history of the small states, the Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland states. Lesotho's independence 66, Botswana's independence 66, Swaziland's independence 68, and then, last but not least, the struggle in Namibia, which was still treated for all intents and purposes as a colony by South Africa, despite the fact that it was a trusteeship. South Africa was given the responsibility of holding Namibia in trust. After the First World War, Germany was defeated, and its colony, Namibia, was then handed over to the Union of South Africa after the First World War. But for all intents and purposes, Namibia was treated as a colony. That was what was happening. Now, in the 80s, that whole struggle, internally in South Africa and externally, was really intensifying. That's exactly the time when we were teaching Tito and his peers the politics of South Africa and the interaction with Southern Africa.